Why was this asteroid hidden from us?
They didn't build the city to survive an attack. They didn't hide it to avoid discovery. And it was never meant to be permanent. This documentary reveals why an advanced civilization chose to place an entire living city inside a moving asteroid, and why keeping it hidden was more important than keeping it safe. You will learn what they were protecting, what they were watching, and why exposure would have ended more than the city itself. By the end of this film, you will understand that the asteroid was not a shelter. From a distance, the asteroid looked unremarkable. Its trajectory was stable, its composition ordinary by deep space standards. No artificial emissions, no energy spikes, no visible alterations. To long-range observation, it was indistinguishable from millions of other objects drifting through the belt. That was intentional. The city was not built on the asteroid's surface. It was carved inward, layered beneath kilometers of dense rock and reinforced matter. Not a dome, not a station. A city with districts, infrastructure, and population density equivalent to a planetary capital, entirely concealed within a natural body that moved according to predictable celestial mechanics. The first assumption made by external analysts was survival. Asteroids provide shielding, radiation protection, natural armor against impact and detection. That explanation was convenient and it was wrong. If survival had been the goal, there were safer options. Artificial habitats, deep-orbit structures, even planetary subsurface cities offered more stability. The asteroid was chosen not because it was safe, but because it was unnoticed. That distinction mattered. The civilization that built the city had already mastered concealment. They could mask signals, bend observation, suppress emissions. Hiding a structure was trivial. Hiding intent was not. A stationary hidden city invites scrutiny over time. Patterns emerge. Curiosity escalates. A moving asteroid does not invite attention. It blends into background noise. Noise was the point. Inside the asteroid, the city functioned normally. Transportation systems compensated for rotation and microgravity shifts. Artificial gravity was localized, not uniform. The design favored adaptation over comfort. Architecture followed the asteroid's internal geometry rather than imposing symmetry. Streets curved subtly. Buildings adjusted over time. Nothing about the city suggested permanence, because permanence was not allowed. The city's population was carefully limited. Growth was controlled. Birth rates monitored. Migration restricted. This was not a refuge for the masses. It was a selection. Every resident was there for a reason, even if they were never told what that reason was. From the outside, no one knew the city existed. From the inside, most residents believed the asteroid was merely a vessel, a transport, a temporary habitat en route to a destination they would never reach. That belief was cultivated deliberately. Stability depended on ignorance. The city was hidden not from enemies, but from context. Context would have revealed the real problem. The asteroid's orbit intersected multiple regions of interest. It passed near developing civilizations. It drifted through sensor-dense zones and unclaimed space alike. It was never intercepted because it never appeared worth intercepting. But it observed everything. The city was not running. It was watching, and watching required proximity without presence. The first internal records that hinted at the true purpose were not strategic documents but behavioral studies. Long-term observation of emerging species, analysis of social collapse patterns, tracking of technological acceleration and ethical lag. The city was positioned to witness civilizations at the moment they became dangerous, not to others, but to themselves. The asteroid city was a mobile observation platform disguised as geological debris. But observation alone did not justify a city. Cities imply continuity, culture, memory. If the purpose had been purely analytical, autonomous systems would have sufficed. The decision to place a living population inside the asteroid suggested something more unsettling. They were not just observing others. They were observing themselves. Residents inside the city lived under constraints designed to mirror the pressures faced by the civilizations being monitored. Limited resources, controlled information flow, artificial scarcity. Governance systems intentionally kept imperfect. The city was an experiment embedded within an experiment. A civilization studying how intelligent societies behave when they believe they are hidden, while being hidden themselves. This recursive design served one function above all others. It allowed the builders to measure the moment when secrecy fails. And secrecy always fails eventually. The city was hidden not because discovery was impossible, but because discovery was inevitable, and they needed to know what would happen when it occurred. At this stage, the asteroid had already completed dozens of observation cycles. Civilizations rose and fell without. The city was not hidden to avoid detection. It was hidden to control the conditions of discovery. That difference separated this structure from every other concealed habitat ever built. Most hidden cities assume that being found is failure. This one assumed the opposite. Discovery was not an accident to be prevented. It was an event to be delayed, shaped, and studied. The asteroid was not chosen for its density alone. Its orbit intersected with emerging civilizations at specific developmental thresholds, not when they were primitive, not when they were interstellar, but when they began to extend awareness beyond their immediate world. The moment when curiosity outpaced caution, that moment was predictable. Civilizations always reach it. They build sensors before they build restraint. They listen before they understand what listening implies. They search for others long before they know how to respond to being found. The city's builders knew this because they had already passed through that phase themselves and nearly destroyed everything as a result. The asteroid functioned as a filter, not a physical barrier but a cognitive one. It separated civilizations capable of noticing anomalies from those capable of interpreting them correctly. Most detected nothing. Some detected something strange. Very few asked the right questions. Those few were the reason the city existed. Inside the asteroid, long-term models tracked not only technological growth, but interpretive behavior. How did a civilization respond to unexplained signals? Did it escalate militarily? Did it hide the discovery? Did it share the information publicly or centralize it under authority? Each response revealed more than any weapon system ever could. Discovery was not binary, it was gradual. First, statistical noise, then pattern recognition, then denial, then obsession. Civilizations that reached the obsession phase without collapsing internally were flagged, not contacted. Flagged. Contact was never the immediate goal. The city's inhabitants understood this only in fragments. Most believed their role was custodial, maintaining systems, preserving knowledge, ensuring continuity. They were told the asteroid was a sanctuary in motion, a cultural arc drifting through time. That story was close enough to truth to be believable, but deeper layers of the city housed different records, restricted archives accessible only to a rotating subset of analysts. These records showed correlation curves between discovery attempts and self-destruction. The conclusion was unavoidable. Most civilizations were not destroyed by external threats. They were destroyed by the meaning they assigned to discovery. Finding evidence of others destabilized internal cohesion. Religions fractured. Political systems radicalized. Military doctrines accelerated beyond ethical frameworks. The idea of not being alone reshaped priorities faster than societies could adapt. The city existed to measure that reshaping, and to decide what came next. The asteroid's concealment ensured that discovery could not happen accidentally. Only civilizations capable of sustained observation, patience, and restraint would ever notice something was wrong. Even then, noticing was not enough. Interpretation mattered more than detection. A civilization that assumed hostility upon detecting the anomaly was already disqualified. One that assumed superiority followed soon after. The city was not hiding from them. It was waiting them out. Waiting filtered more effectively than defense. Inside the city, this logic shaped everything. Governance systems were intentionally slow. Decision-making was distributed. Emergency authority was limited by design. The city was not optimized for rapid response because rapid response was the very trait they were testing for elsewhere. If the city itself could not resist escalation under pressure, it had no right to judge others. This self-imposed constraint frustrated many inhabitants. Crises that could have been resolved instantly were allowed to unfold. Scarcity was managed, not eliminated. Information was shared but incompletely. The city was uncomfortable by design. Comfort produced complacency. Complacency corrupted judgment. Every generation inside the asteroid lived with the understanding that the city might one day be found. They were told that discovery would be dangerous, but necessary. Not because outsiders posed a threat, but because the response to discovery would reveal everything. What they were never told was the final contingency. The city was not meant to survive discovery. It was meant to test what happened next. If a civilization discovered the city and reacted with restraint, curiosity, and patience, then the city would reveal itself. If the reaction was fear-driven, militarized, or exploitative, the city would disappear. Not by fleeing, by becoming indistinguishable from the asteroid again. The concealment systems were layered to allow full internal shutdown. Habitats could be sealed. Infrastructure could be sacrificed. Even the population could be reduced if necessary. Survival of the city was secondary to preservation of the filter. That was the reason the city was hidden, not to protect itself, but to ensure that only the right kind of discovery ever mattered. The first civilization that came close to the asteroid city did not announce its discovery. That alone distinguished it from all previous observers. The anomaly was detected at the edge of their sensor array, registered as an inconsistency rather than a signal. There was no broadcast, no celebratory declaration. The data was routed inward, quietly, to a limited group of analysts. Inside the city, this triggered a shift. Proximity alerts activated not because detection had occurred, but because interpretation had begun. The civilization had not assumed intent. It had not labeled the anomaly as hostile or divine. It treated it as unresolved. That response placed it outside every predictive cluster the city's models had relied on. The asteroid continued along its path. No maneuvering, no signal suppression. The concealment layers remained passive. The city allowed observation to continue. What followed was the most dangerous phase of the filter. The civilization began a slow process of verification. Additional sensors were redirected, but cautiously. No military assets were mobilized. No emergency protocols invoked. The anomaly was discussed as a scientific problem, not a strategic one. This restraint triggered internal debate within the city. Some argued that the threshold for response had been met. Others warned that early engagement could bias outcomes. Bias was the one variable they could not afford. The city's inhabitants watched as the civilization's internal discourse evolved. Initial curiosity gave way to discomfort. The anomaly resisted explanation. It did not behave like a natural object, yet it did not emit the signatures of artificial construction. The ambiguity unsettled their models. Ambiguity always does. Pressure mounted within the civilization to escalate analysis. Broader access to the data was proposed. This was the critical moment. Expansion of knowledge is often the point where restraint fails. Information spreads faster than context. The city's models predicted fragmentation once disclosure crossed institutional boundaries. Disclosure was delayed. That delay altered everything. The civilization chose to protect the uncertainty rather than eliminate it. They contained the anomaly within a small epistemic boundary, aware that premature exposure could destabilize political and social systems. This choice contradicted nearly every historical precedent the city had recorded. Inside the asteroid, alarms remained silent, but attention intensified. This was no longer passive observation. The city had reached the edge of its own doctrine. A civilization was approaching the filter without triggering disqualification. The concealment systems were adjusted, not to hide more effectively but to allow clearer observation. This was risky. Reducing noise increased detectability, but detectability was no longer the concern. Reaction was. As the asteroid passed closer, the civilization initiated a controlled probe. Not a weapon, not a message. A calibration device designed to measure mass distribution and internal composition. It was a question, not a demand. The probe's data confirmed what their analysts already suspected. The asteroid was hollowed in ways natural processes could not explain. There was structure, design, intent. The city prepared for phase disclosure. Phase disclosure was not contact. It was revelation without interaction. The city would allow itself to be known but not engaged. No communication, no explanation. The existence alone would test the civilization's response. Before phase disclosure could be initiated, internal resistance surfaced within the city. Some inhabitants argued that the civilization's restraint warranted immediate contact. Others warned that contact would contaminate the filter permanently. The city had never reached this stage before. Doctrine provided no guidance. Debate was not allowed to delay protocol. The asteroid crossed the threshold zone. Concealment layers adjusted. Gravitational readings shifted subtly. Thermal anomalies emerged just enough to confirm artificiality beyond doubt. The civilization reacted, not with fear, with silence. Data traffic spiked internally, but external channels remained quiet. No public disclosure, no mobilization. The anomaly was confirmed and then deliberately contained. This was the moment the city's predictive architecture failed. Silence had not been modeled as a stable response. Inside the asteroid, emergency councils convened, not because of threat, but because of uncertainty. A civilization had passed the filter in a way no one had anticipated. The city was now the variable. Protocol demanded disappearance. The rules were explicit. Discovery without disqualification triggered concealment collapse. The city was to erase itself, returning the asteroid to a state indistinguishable from inert matter. The order was prepared, and then it paused. Pausing was not rebellion. It was hesitation born of recognition. The civilization outside had demonstrated the very qualities the city was designed to test for: restraint, patience, responsibility under uncertainty. Erasing the city now would invalidate the filter's purpose. Keeping it visible would invalidate its neutrality. The city faced the same dilemma it had been built to study. What happens when discovery does not justify intervention? The asteroid passed out of the threshold zone without phase disclosure. Concealment layers restored fully. The civilization was left with confirmed evidence of artificiality and no further information. That was the most dangerous gift imaginable. The city's inhabitants understood the consequences. The civilization would now carry knowledge without context. That knowledge would reshape priorities, institutions, and beliefs. The city had not intervened, but it had altered a trajectory. This outcome was never supposed to occur. The filter had worked too well, and for the first time, the city realized that hiding was no longer enough. Because the question was no longer whether someone would find them. The city was never destroyed. It was abandoned. That decision did not come with urgency or panic. It came slowly, after cycles of internal review that stretched longer than any previous protocol. The asteroid continued its course, indistinguishable once again from inert rock, while inside the city something irreversible occurred. The filter had succeeded, and in doing so, it had rendered itself obsolete. The civilization that discovered the anomaly did not reach out. Weeks passed, then months. Observation continued, cautious and contained. No attempt was made to approach again, no effort to force contact. The absence of action confirmed what the city's builders had feared most. A civilization capable of restraint does not need guidance. That realization destabilized the city more than any hostile discovery ever could. The city had been built on the assumption that advanced civilizations required external evaluation. That someone had to decide when contact was safe, when it was deserved, when it was necessary. The silent response from the outside shattered that hierarchy. The observed had demonstrated maturity without validation. Inside the city, this produced division. Some argued that contact should finally occur, not as intervention but as acknowledgement. Others warned that acknowledgement would contaminate the very outcome they had spent centuries filtering for. The filter was designed to identify restraint, not reward it. Reward implied authority. Authority was the thing they could no longer justify. The abandonment plan was activated quietly, not evacuation, dissolution. Systems were powered down in stages. Infrastructure was sealed rather than dismantled. Archives were compressed and embedded deeper into the asteroid's core, inaccessible without deliberate excavation. The city did not erase itself. It withdrew from relevance. Population reduction was voluntary. Residents dispersed over time, reassigned to distant habitats, long-range vessels, and isolated research enclaves. No one was told that the city would never be reactivated. They understood it anyway. Cities do not survive the moment their purpose collapses. The final inhabitants walked corridors that would never be used again. Streets went dark. Artificial gravity zones were decommissioned. The asteroid's interior returned to silence, save for minimal stabilization systems ensuring structural integrity. The asteroid was left to drift. Externally, nothing changed. The civilization that had detected the anomaly continued to advance, carrying unanswered knowledge like a controlled fracture in its worldview. They knew something was there once. They knew it was artificial. They also knew that whatever it was, it chose not to engage. That absence became its own message. The city's builders had feared that discovery would provoke fear, aggression, or exploitation. They had not prepared for indifference combined with responsibility. They had not considered that the most advanced response to discovery might be restraint without expectation. That response made the city unnecessary. The asteroid continues to move through space today, following the same predictable orbit. It emits no signals. It carries no inhabitants. To sensors, it is nothing. To those who know where to look, it is something far more unsettling. It is evidence. Evidence that a civilization once chose to hide not because it was weak, but because it understood that being seen too early could destroy what it was meant to observe. Evidence that discovery is not the end of secrecy, understanding is. The city inside the asteroid was never meant to last. It was a test, a question posed to the universe, not with words but with absence. Who deserves to be found? The answer, it turned out, was not the city. It was the civilization capable of discovering something extraordinary and choosing not to exploit it. And once that answer existed, the city no longer had a reason to remain. The asteroid drifts on, empty, silent, indistinguishable from debris. And somewhere, a civilization lives with the knowledge that it was seen and left alone. That knowledge will shape every decision it makes from now